Section 5, methods of construction and materials. The first bit says there shouldn't be any hard or sharp edges or angles. I think you'd be hard pushed to find that on a bouncy castle, but you could imagine an outy seam. Most seams are on the inside, but if you go to the bottom of a bouncy castle, you all know there's an outy seam on there, and that shouldn't be on the top. And that's kind of obvious, and you'd be hard pushed to find a bouncy castle that had an outy seam on the top. I've certainly never come across it, and I can't imagine anyone would sell one with that. Should be no hard objects that can be come into contact with the bouncy castle. Again, I suppose it's what it's saying is the blower must be away from the bouncy castle. That's why you have the long chutes for them to connect to. And in operation, of course, you wouldn't put it right next to a wall or something like that, where a little bit of deformation, they slam their cells against a brick wall. But that's not in the design and construction, that's in the operation. I'm trying to think of somewhere where there would be a hard object. You could think of a mechanical bull, but that doesn't come under this because it's controlled by the amusement devices legislation instead, and you can't avoid having a hard object in the middle of the bouncy castle because it's a mechanical bull. It talks about seams and joints, and they must be able to withstand the appropriate forces, no less than the material itself, in all those places. Again, that I don't know of a bouncy castle which would fall apart straight away. When somebody stands on it or bounces on it, whatever. But you could imagine the difference between cheap and expensive bouncy castles. They used to be stitched, then they were double stitched, and then triple stitched and quadruple stitched. The more stitching, the more force it can take, obviously. But obviously the more expensive it becomes, etc. So they specified that it must be able to take at least the load of the material itself. The material, so still on section 5, methods of construction of materials. The material must be of a certain tensile strength, tear strength, and weft in warp and weft. So tear strength and tensile strength. You're going to have to take the manufacturer's word on this because they're all made of the same sort of material by and large. There are differences. You can tell cheap from expensive materials. You can tell older ones from newer ones, etc. Older ones tend to be thicker and hence probably longer lasting. I can't imagine many bouncy castles being made of material which wasn't able to take the stresses. They wouldn't last very long. So yeah, I think if you buy them from any large manufacturer, they're going to take the load which you put on them. If they don't, you'll buy from a different person next time. They must be flame retardant. That makes sense. Hardly an issue I would have thought for most bouncy castles. If you've got a big fire going on, the bouncy castle is probably the least of your worries. Possibly more important for me because I've got a lot of bouncy castles all sitting here in a big barn, and I don't want them going up in flames, and I don't want them giving off toxic fumes, etc., etc. The thread which they're connected to should be a non-rotting material, nylon or something like that, with a tensile strength of at least 88 newtons. Who knew? The netting mesh. Can you imagine netting on the side of a bouncy castle so you can see in? It's all good. Well, the netting, the holes for it should be smaller than 8mm round. So it specifies the exact dimensions of an 8mm rod and says if you had that 8mm circular diameter rod, you should not be able to insert it through the netting. It then goes on to talk about it later with another specification, but that's fine. So you can imagine that. And that's to stop fingers getting caught in and then can't get the fingers out type thing. To be that intermediate, I've got my fingers caught, etc. And would probably make things uncomfortable, not life-threatening, but yeah, it shouldn't be done. Rope clamber nets. We don't have any of these nowadays, but we used to have an old slide which the climb to get up was a rope clamber net. It talks about the specifications for that. You could have thick rope, at least 12mm diameter, securely knotted and attached to prevent lifting, so you can't get underneath it, etc., etc. Clamber ropes. Now that would apply to our climbing wall, inflatable climbing wall. They have to be fixed at both ends. And the maximum possible distance displacement from the centre should not exceed 10% of the distance between fixing points. So if the climbing wall, actual climbing distance is 6 metres, that rope shouldn't be able to deviate more than 60 centimetres either side. So it's quite taut in the middle. Yeah, that's not going to work. I can see the point. If you've got small ropes inside bouncy castles, you don't want kids tying them around their necks, etc., something like that. But it does mean that our climbing wall is non-compliant. Lastly, with section 5, it says that zips must be able to withstand the air pressure and inside, and should be easy to use from both sides, because somebody might be trapped inside. Yeah. Zip and the deflation zip shall be hidden under flaps. They all are, and it makes sense because you don't want kids running by and just unzipping them for a laugh. Again, I can't imagine anybody not doing that. And then it just talks about paint being non-flammable and non-toxic. That's fine.